authors, filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello everyone, welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man, and joining me today is going to be Stanley Jolie. That's assuming I'm pronouncing it correctly, and if I'm not, I'm going to get him to correct me on that here in just a minute. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to mention to everybody that if you want to learn more about Stanley, you could go to his website, CajunGhostHunter.com. Also, if y'all want to listen in here at the site and you're listening from elsewhere, come to www.talknowradio.com. Free membership will get you into the chat room. The fact of the matter is, if I didn't have you log in to get into chat, spam bots could get into chat, and then that would just ruin the experience for all the listeners. So I know it's a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's there to make keep down an even worse inconvenience, in other words. Now, one last thing on that also. If y'all would like to call in and ask questions, the number is 832-632-7904. And Stanley, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. How are you this afternoon, Royce?
Oh, I'm doing great. I don't think I could complain. I don't even think I want to this time. So, we're going to talk today about your book, Paranormal Investigations, and I just got to ask this one. It's not really significant, but it's just killing my curiosity. Are a lot of these reports or chronicles, are they in the Baton Rouge area by any chance?
They cover all of South Louisiana, from Lafayette to New Orleans, and some places in between. Also, all the way down on the coast, near on the Mississippi Delta, down there near what's called Venice, Louisiana, a place called Point Alahash, Louisiana, where they have a woodland plantation.
Sounds like you've been traveling all up and down the Mississippi River.
Yeah, well, my job takes me around. I have to travel a lot, so whenever I have to spend the night, I stay in these nice bed and breakfasts, and they happen to be haunted, so I investigate.
You know, I don't think it's just Louisiana alone, though. It seems like everywhere you go that has a bed and breakfast, might near every one of them seems to be haunted. Yeah,
I think that there are spirits everywhere, and especially with these bed and breakfasts, a lot of them are old. Built in the early part of the 20th century or the 1800s. So they carry a lot of history with them, and thereby they have a lot of residual spiritual energy there.
Right. And I know that Louisiana has a reputation for being just full of ghost sightings.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so much rich history down here, and there's so many things that happen down here, especially pre-Civil War and post-Civil War, with all of the plantations around here where they had a lot of slaves.
Yeah, and I think one of the things for now you said post-Civil War, are you referring to the War of 1812?
No, the war between the states in the 1860s. And that was the downfall of the sugarcane plantations once the Civil War was over, and the slaves were freed, and so these large plantations, they didn't have the workforce to support them after that.
Now, my wife just informed me that she hasn't heard you at all. She says I was breaking up, but my equipment is registering. So I'm wondering what could possibly be going wrong, unless there's something going on in her computer. I'm going to say if you speak to me and it registers, lights up on my broadcaster, then probably you're getting through to me, And if I'm registering, I'm getting through to the computer, and I tested it, and it come out on a test file, then more than likely it's making it up to the player, and there might be something going on my wife's end.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us a little, something about what got you interested in this book?
Well, when my mother passed 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, a few months after I had been grieving, I started watching these paranormal shows on TV, and I saw these different types of spirit boxes that they used to communicate with the dead. So I decided to go ahead and purchase me one to see if I could communicate with my mother. And in the course of getting this equipment and using it, I started hearing spirit voices here at my house, and I would take it to the cemetery where my mother was buried. And eventually she did communicate with me, and using the equipment in my travels around here at these different plantations, and I started picking up spirit voices there too. So from there on, everywhere I go, I would just bring my equipment with me, and I would be able to capture spirit voices practically anywhere.
Okay. Now, when you were just talking, it was registering, lighting up that your voice was taking. So I've told her to restart a computer in Skype, because I suspect that maybe there's something going on over there, because all the other equipment, it's registering that it's working, so where else would it be?
Okay.
Now, I do apologize for that little distraction, but I felt it was important, because if anybody else was listening and having trouble, well, they wouldn't be hearing, in other words.
Right, I understand.
So, back to the topic at hand. What would you say is some of the most, this may be a hard question because it may be hard to choose, some of the most interesting haunts you've investigated?
Well, my most intense investigations have taken place at Laurel Valley Plantation, which is only about 10 miles here from my house. And actually, when I go out there, there's slave quarters out there. It's the oldest operating plantation, sugarcane plantation in the United States. And the slave quarters that are there at Laurel Valley, they're in a state of kind of disrepair now. So they're sealed behind barbed wire. But you can travel down the road, and you can actually sit out on the road and, perform your investigations from there. And so, I'd go out there every Saturday after I'd go to visit my mother's tomb. It was just a few miles further. I would go out to Laurel Valley, and I would sit out there on Saturday afternoons and just go ahead and record. And the voices that I captured there were just so intense. I captured so many residual voices, so many intelligent responses to my questions. It was just amazing. And for some reason, the spirits kept on talking about this person called Edgar Fleeker, and that he had killed another person. Her name was Molly Dunn. And every time I go out there, I would just ask the spirits out there about Edgar Fleeker, and I would always get responses to his name. And in fact, the spirits themselves would even say his name in their responses to me.
So you have actually held conversations with spirits, or at least bits and pieces of them?
Yes, of course, yes. And the way that I do it, Royce, is I have an RT EVP recorder that's manufactured by DAS, Gary Galka's corporation. And what it is I usually scan at a radio FM frequencies at 50 milliseconds, which means that every second it's scanning 20 radio stations. So if I get a spirit voice that talks over 2 seconds long, it's the same voice, he's talking over 40 radio stations. So it's definitely paranormal. And what I do in my procedure is I do 3-minute sessions. And I just use that 3-minute session. And spirits, they have no idea of space and time. Space and time no longer exist for them. So I sometimes get answers to my questions before my question. I might get answers to my question 2 questions down in the recording. And so what I do is I take them and use Audacity software, and I put my questions and my answers, and I'll copy and paste them together so that, you don't have a lot of banter in between the actual question and answer. And also what I do, Royce, is the responses that I get from the spirits, I use Audacity software, and I will reverse the speech. And when I reverse the speech, usually what happens is if it's an intelligent response in forward speech, I usually get an intelligent response in reverse speech also. And not only that, but that reverse speech is usually related to the subject that the intelligent speech, forward speech, is talking about also. So thereby, I can take my reverse speech, take it, copy and paste it behind the forward speech, and I get a long sentence in from a response to a question. And that's why if you see some of my posts on my webpage, they are long responses, okay, but by the same voice, which is very, it was very intriguing to me that, that I can do that it does that the software is capable of doing that.
Now, you said something in all of that got my attention, because this is something that I think almost everybody has talked about, at least in a form, or thought about, and that is the space-time and the spirit world. Because you ever wonder, when you talk with God, they say at the end of time, time will be no more, and we know that space and time are interrelated. You can't create a space slate between my chair and my dryer without the time it takes to walk from that space to the dryer, for example. So, how does this thing about time not being no more, and when you said space and time don't exist instead of just not time, I had a thought. I says, what if when you die, you blend and become a part of the big whole? Because you are now the whole, there would appear to be no conception of space or time, either one, would there?
No. Right. We become a part of the infinite. We become, we meld back to God from whence we came. And that becomes the mystery. and also, Royce, when I was talking about this reverse speech, if you go ahead and if you would go ahead and you would record your voice in forward speech and then reverse it, it would be gibberish. And I have taken responses from spirits. I have duplicated exactly what they said, and I went ahead and I played my speech backwards, and it was gibberish. But for some reason, spirits are capable of taking that waveform, manipulating it somehow where they have intelligent responses instead of gibberish in that reverse speech. And that's what's really fascinating to me, that how they can do that.
Well, there's another question, though. Did they really do that, or is everything on the other side already reversed from us, like it's a mirror of us?
Well, that's a good point. But being that it's a mirror, maybe that's the way they can respond to us in reverse speech. I don't know. That's a mystery to me. And that's and it defies laws of physics as far as sound goes for them to be able to do that.
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't think we can manipulate sound. Well, other than to put it on a recorder and then play it back in reverse, but by that time, it goes so fast you can't make it out.
Right.
Which I don't understand why they have to, I don't think they have to play it back that fast. I think it's just that most people don't want to wait for a rewind, so they make it go that fast.
Well, I've found that, like when I play my recordings for other people, and they say they talk so fast, and it's like, yeah, I don't know why they do, and especially when I do radio sweeps like that, and somehow they can take the phonemes in the radio speech and make words out of it themselves, okay? but they make it so quickly and they talk so fast sometimes. And then it sounds like a chorus of voices when you're playing it back. It sounds like, many people speaking at different pitches, but all saying the same thing, just like a chorus. So that's really fascinating too. But even when they do that, they will sometimes give intelligent responses to my questions, which is also fascinating.
So this is how you can tell that it's not residual energy then, because it's an intelligent answer to a question, not just something said that could be repeating out of the air, in other words.
Oh, right, exactly. Oh, yeah. I've been out to, in fact, in my book, I wrote about this episode where it was last July. We had a thunderstorm here in Louisiana, and the power went out for my internet. Okay, so I was working at the time, and I said, I'm going to go in my bedroom. I'm going to do an EVP session. So when I did, on the recorder, I asked, my son was here at the time, and he was in his room, and he was playing on his computer, okay? And I asked the spirits, I said, what's that young boy's name that's on the other side of the house? And you can hear it clear as can be. They said, that's Philip Robleski. And that's my pen name. My real name's Robleski. And, who's ever heard of a Cajun named Robleski, okay? So I took my mom's maiden name to use that as my pen name. Well, it's very rare that living people can pronounce my last name without me phonetically saying it for them when they first read it, because it has W's in it. It's the Polish name. Here I have a spirit that, clear as can be, says his first name and our last name, clear as can be. That's Philip Robleski. That's amazing to me. That just astounded me when I first heard that.
So you're thinking that maybe this spirit was possibly even related to you, but preceded you in the house, or maybe already passed away before you got there?
Oh yeah. Well, I really think that the spirits of our loved ones are with us all the time. So the spirit of my mother's in this house. I've also talked to the spirit of my wife's father in this house and gotten intelligent responses.
Okay.
In fact.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
In fact, I did a spirit session in front of my wife's father's picture on a vanity that we have in the bedroom. And on the table there is a statue from one of the caskets when they died. On each corner of the casket, they had a statue of the Pietà. It's a replication of a famous piece of artwork by Michelangelo, Virgin Mary holding the dead Jesus. And that statue was on the vanity. So I asked Gordon, my wife's father, I said, Gordon, do you like this Pietà that came from your casket? And the spirit voice replied, it's Marguerite's casket the statue's from. Now, Marguerite is the name of my wife's mother. She also passed a couple of years after Gordon passed. So I was there, maybe I'm confused on where this statue came from. So when Barbara got home that night from work, I said, baby, where did the statue of the Pietà, whose casket is that from? She goes, it's from Mama's. A spirit not only gave me an intelligent response, but he corrected me on letting me know whose casket that statue had come from. And the amazing thing about that is that he had already passed by the time Marguerite had died. So he had seen it, and from the spirit world, he had recognized that Pietà and where it had come from, even though he had already passed.
Wow, that sounds almost like they're trying to send a message, or trying to let you know that at least that they're cognate or something, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. Oh yeah, they'll let you know. In fact, I every week or every 2 weeks, I might do a session here in my house just to see if my mother's still here and is still trying to communicate with me. And this past week, I was doing a session, and the voice came on and said, "I remember the World's Fair." And I'm there going, oh my goodness, that's my mother, because my mother had, in 1963, had taken my sister to visit our relatives in New York City at the same time that the World's Fair had occurred up there. So that was just, evidence to me that, yes, she's still here, and she was just letting me know that by saying something that only she, had experienced in her life.
Okay. Now, also my wife was asking in chat, she had heard something about this place in Louisiana where the slave killed her owner with some kind of leaves in the cake, and wants to know if that was the place you were talking about. So she also heard she had her ear cut off for, eavesdropping, so that might help jog your memory.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville. That's not in my book, but I hope to put it in a sequel. But just recently, it was probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, my wife and I had gone up there for an overnight stay. And while we were there, we met some people from Texas. They were up there, and they were also investigating. And at nighttime, after the tours, the daily tours, they locked the doors to the foyer and the stairs, okay, that lead up to the where the Clark Woodruff room is. And only the person that has the key to that door to get into the foyer with the room upstairs, they're the only ones that have the keys for the foyer is what I'm getting at. But we met them, and we were talking with them, and they were outside, and we were just, having a good time. And the guy there, he said, here, go ahead and take the key if you want. Later on we can do an EVP session together, but if you want to do something now, go right ahead. And I said, oh, great, yeah, sure. And I went ahead, and we went in there, and my wife stayed downstairs. And I went up to the 17th step where supposedly one of the former owners had died after he had been shot. He was trying to get to his wife. So I went on the 17th step and sat there, and I was doing an EVP session. And after I was finished, I got up and I walked around upstairs, just looking around, outside of the rooms, okay? And when I was coming back downstairs, my wife's standing outside, and there's another door that's locked, okay, that goes into the women's parlor. And that door was rattling as I was coming down. And Barbara looked up at me, and she said, that's the third time it's done it since she went up there. And I went, wow. I said, that's something. And so we went back outside, and everybody, things were winding down outside. And they said, well, let's go ahead and let's go in there and go do an EVP session. So we went outside of the women's parlor that's sitting there locked. And as we're setting up our equipment, all of a sudden the door rattles on its own. And after it rattles, we start hearing string music coming from behind the locked door. And we all looked at each other. I mean, we were just all amazed. And so we all gathered around in a circle for some reason. It was just like, okay, y'all hearing this? And everybody's holding out their arms, and all of the hair on everybody's arms was standing on end. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So I went ahead and I hurried up and I set up my camera on a table that was facing that door. And I turned on my camera. When I turned on my camera, all of a sudden you can hear the door starts rattling again a little bit, and you can hear me. I exclaim. I go, "Oh yes!" I said, "Are y'all playing some beautiful music back there?" And that was just amazing to have witnessed that and heard that music. But a former owner, Frances Kermeen, who had lived there and wrote a book called The Myrtles Plantation, she said that one night they had woken up in the house and they heard string music coming from inside of the women's parlor. And when they all went down to the women's parlor, and when they got into the parlor, they heard the string music again, but it wasn't coming from in the parlor, and they never could pinpoint where that music was coming from.
Let me apologize for that noise. That was your website.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
While
I went ahead and
talking, opened up your webpage in a different tab, was going to copy the URL out of the address bar and paste it into the chat room. And I heard that noise, and I X'd out of it, and I just opened up properties and copied it out of there.
Okay. Yeah, I had taken some of the, I had processed some of my EVPs from the Myrtles, and I went ahead and made some little videos and just went ahead and put it on my webpage, even though it's not in the book yet, because it really fascinated me, because the EVPs that I captured there's a lot of reference to Chloe, and supposedly Chloe is urban legend. There's no written history about the slave Chloe. But yet, they give the tours and they talk about the urban legend and talk about how Chloe was the mistress of the owner at that time, Clark Woodruff, and that she was brought into the house to take care of the children also. But she loved to eavesdrop, and supposedly she was eavesdropping on the Clark's conversations with some business one day, and when he came out the door, he caught her, and he brought her to the local blacksmith there on the plantation and had her ear chopped off. So she wore a turban, and he banished her back to the fields, which is kind of like a death knell for a slave back at that time. So supposedly he went away on business one day, and while he was gone, it was one of the children's birthdays. So she baked some a birthday cake for the child, and she laced it with some oleander. But she thought she was using just enough to make them sick, so she could nurse them back to health, and they would bring her back into the house as a reward. But she put too much, and it killed both the wife and the 2 children. But that's urban legend. Supposedly, the wife and the 2 children died from yellow fever at different times. But anyway, I mean, back then, there's no record of a Chloe, but back then, how much records are there on slaves pre-Civil War? A lot of slaves registered after the Civil War as free men, so there's more documentation of history as far as the free men go than there are of slaves, because they were treated as property pre-Civil War. But anyway, getting back to Chloe, when the family died, she ran to the slave quarters near the river, and she was seeking refuge there, and she wanted them to hide her. But the slaves there, supposedly, they said, oh no, we'd get in trouble with the master if we did that. So they brought her back to the house, and the master said, go ahead, kill her. And supposedly they brought her back to the slave quarters, and they hung her. But they said they hung her from a tree, according to urban legend. But if you notice on my website, that when I asked what happened to her, the spirit responded that they hung me from the rafters. So rafters are either in a barn, or maybe they hung her from an old slave house down there in the quarters. So that was interesting that I got that EVP response.
Well, do you think these here spirits can be helped to go back onto the other side? Or in other words, not to be lingering around to haunt, in other words.
I think that a spirit that likes its haunt is going to stay there as long as it can, until somebody can coax it to go to the light. If there is a light. We don't know. Nobody's ever really come back to tell us, So maybe the spiritual energy just stays there forever, there are many places here in South Louisiana where there have been Indian burial grounds that have been built over. And, when people do that, even though the original structure is gone, the spirit still lingers in that area.
Yeah, that's where they got the idea for the Poltergeist movies when they came out, was, about graves, homes being built over grave sites. I think that it was made for a good movie and a lot of money, but it probably also made a good point at the same time about, having respect for the dead, in other words. Right,
exactly. And that's why, a lot of these historical sites should be preserved, and But, I mean, we have this modern world where, you know, land space in the urban areas is, as it spreads out, as the urban area spreads out, it starts to engulf these different